Welcome. I think we're actually this week marking the halfway point for Conchas y Café, this series. So we made it. We're halfway there. And we'll have issue number 2 of volume 6 done about, I think, a month and a half from now. So yeah, we're making progress. And I also want to say thank you guys for those of you that shared last week during our workshop session. We'll have another workshop session where you guys can share your work again in a couple of weeks. Obviously, building up to the day that I'll be collecting your final work. If in case you have any friends or family or anybody that you know that might be interested in joining Conchas y Café, there's still a chance, obviously, for them to join us now. Even though we are halfway there to finishing up this series, obviously with all of our videos living on YouTube now, people can binge watch our lessons and get caught up on everything over the holidays coming up. And speaking about the holidays, also just wanted to remind you that on the Tuesday before Christmas and the Tuesday before New Year, I am expecting still to have a session where I'll have a lesson, and I believe one of those, the one before New Year's, will also be a workshop session, so you guys can share your work up to that point as well. Either way, I'll keep y'all updated with the plan on Google Classroom as we get closer to that. So, yeah, let's get into some writing. And just like as I'm queuing up our presentation here, I was just wondering, how you guys are feeling. How's everybody doing with the writing so far? Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to make before we get into our quote of the week?
I have a question.
Yes, Miss
Melissa
Lois?
has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've gotten, as we went along, my pieces written, but then I'm thinking back of what are the categories, the different slots that each one is supposed to fit in, because it's weird the way I'm thinking, it's like this last piece that you assigned for us, and I read over the handout, and I'm just trying to figure out what category would that be under.
Well, keep in mind that the theme for our current issue is creating the people. Basically, it's all about characterization. That's what we've been covering this entire time. And so it's really about, different ways in which we characterize, either fictional characters or ourselves. So there's no like different theme for each week. It's all the same theme. It's just different ways that we're approaching the theme.
That brings clarity, because I thought, well, the way I had written my notes down in the beginning, that character was that one particular like entity, but it's the whole thing, and then each writing under that would be in what a thing, person, or place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand a little bit better now, because I was thinking character was focused on one particular person
Mm-hmm.
all the way through, but no, it's on different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for this one, yes, it's different characters that you might be creating, or different approaches to telling the story of a single character.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you're not getting it confused with Héroes de Los Angeles, which I know you're also a part of. That workshop series is specifically about your hero, and so that would be a different way
Oh,
of
no,
writing.
that's separate. It's just
Yeah.
that I didn't get all my, with me messing around with this computer, and not comprehending everything, and I was kind of like confused a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, no
yeah.
problem.
So so I understand now. Character is the theme,
Hmm.
and then each, how do you say, attitude that we approach, we describe the characteristics of it
Mm-hmm.
and its influence, right?
Right.
I understand. I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Cool.
I can't verbalize it correctly, but I got it.
All right, Miss Lois. I'm glad that I was able to provide some clarity. And Mao, I'm glad that you're feeling pretty good. Hopefully, we'll be able to see a number of submissions from you this time around.
Yeah, let me get some water because I'm coughing.
Yeah,
my throat is getting dry.
All right. And actually, and not to like call you out, Miss Luce, but I did actually see your message that you had sent me previously about asking, about why, ways in which people can be more prolific, or techniques to write more. Um, you know, the there really is no right or wrong way to approach writing, and writing a lot. There's definitely different ways in which people can practice writing on a regular basis, and one of them could be journaling. So if every day you just dedicate like 5 minutes to writing, even if it's just simple thoughts that you're having, nothing that's like poetry that you want to, add to our zine. That's just a way to get ideas generating, and who knows, maybe one of those little journal entries might actually turn into a poem for you. So there's also no pressure, and this is for everybody. There's no pressure in creating every single week. The prompts that I give you every week are just prompts. They're for you to practice. So don't feel like you have to follow the guidelines. You do not have to, always submit something every single week. If you do, great, and I'll obviously give you feedback. But yeah, there's no pressure here to perform in any way. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I guess I was just hoping for, wanting to know what there's any secret to getting inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's just write.
Yeah, it's just writing, and accepting that, everything that you write is really for you first. Even if it's something that's just kind of you playing around and has no real end game. Yeah, as Mauricio says, there is no right or wrong answer. It's just doing, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Ultimately, my words of encouragement for you and for everyone is to just simply, let go of the thought process and just write. Just do the act of writing, because the editing process, that's where the real structure comes. That's where you can figure out whether or not something is worth pursuing. Some writers, their process is to just write something once a month, and they'll spend the entire month editing that one single piece, or they'll write it and then come back to it years later. Whereas, for other writers, it's like, I'm gonna get this done in 10, 15 minutes, and that's it. I'm gonna finalize it and never look back. So everybody's different.
I don't work that way, obviously.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, but everybody's style is different. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I'd forgotten I'd even put that out there for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge it last week. I've been a little busy, but I did see your message. So.
Thank you, Luis.
Yeah. And then if you're like Abraham, you can always drink. Which, I'm not gonna lie, that has helped me on a few occasions. That being said, let's get into some poetry. So this week our handout features a quote, and give the screen here a second to finish sharing. There we go. So hopefully you can see my screen. This week I was really thinking a lot about different ways in which we can characterize things. And for us writers, I think that this particular quote, which comes from Friedrich Nietzsche, is pretty kind of accurate, to be honest with you. In the way that we might write about characters. And so, to just simply get into it, here Friedrich Nietzsche, he writes, to predict the behavior of ordinary people in advance, you only have to assume that they will always try to escape a disagreeable situation with the smallest possible expenditure of intelligence. De aquí se los traducí y dice la traducción: para predecir el comportamiento de gente ordinaria con anticipación, solo se tiene que suponer que siempre intentarán escaparse de una situación desagradable con el más pequeño gasto de inteligencia. So, what do y'all think? And I'm pasting our quote of the week into the chat now so that you guys can have it in front of you. Pero ¿cómo les parece nuestra cita del tal Friedrich Nietzsche? What does he say to you? Ms. Luz? Oh, sorry. Ms. Luz and then Nettie.
I just want to say it made me think of Trump.
Yeah, that's a real life example.
and the path of least resistance, I guess, there's physical laws related to that. So I just imagine that our minds must be wired to react that way or to work that way, and just problem solve and find a way to get through whatever it is with the easiest route, and I guess less pain and less energy and probably less thinking about it, or more of a routine. I guess I feel like so much of our mind is wired to just be very super structured and routine based and not a lot of thinking. So we really don't like to break our routines, or we don't like change. We don't think out of the box. We tend to just like to do things in a rote manner. So that's also what this made me think of, which is something I actually try and break. Like they say, wear your watch on the opposite hand you usually wear your watch on, or try and mix things up so that you're not to break up the monotony. So that's where this.
I like that. Yeah. So next I had Nettie, and then Ani, and then Mauricio. So Nettie, what are your thoughts?
I think that there's always an underlying psychology aspect, characterization. I mean, we all are humans, we're flawed, we have egos to protect, secrets to protect, we have fears to mask. So, and we reveal a lot of that in body language and even in itself. So we have a great opportunity to show, don't tell, right here.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. Miss Luz said, we have the path of least resistance. That's what most people will take. And yes, there is definitely a lot of psychology to the way that we might characterize something or someone. Ani, then Mauricio, and then Abraham. Ani?
Well, when you're studying a play or you're writing a play, people want to see action, right? They want to see drama, and it was making me think how playwrights have to create or manufacture extreme situations that they put their characters in, so that they are forced to come out of to get off that track of just taking the path of least resistance, where they have to engage and I was just thinking about that because I really like to write people like how they are in their normal day, and so it's very passive and calm. But at some point, um, those paths need to intersect, and there needs to be a catalyst that comes in there that kind of wrecks things, so that people can be forced to rise up, step out, and confront each other. So that was where my mind went. I'm like, yeah, that may be very true in real life, but in art, if you really want to show what that character is about, you have to put them in a situation where they're forced to not do that, so that you really see what they're made of. You know?
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. And yeah, like Mauricio says in the chat, it's the inciting action in storytelling. Mauricio, since you're next, you want to expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about what Ani said too, because like the little bit I know about Nietzsche, like he had written about the idea of like the overman, like the Übermensch, which is basically like a higher person who kind of has his own like code, moral compass, but it comes from like confronting these conflicts on a daily and kind of experimenting to see like whether the code that you have for yourself like stands to the test, or whether you need to improve on it. So like initially when I thought of the quote, I thought of like people that maybe joke around just to avoid going deep, or maybe like they'll hear an opinion that they don't really agree with, or they'll kind of just brush it off to avoid conflict. But I feel like at the heart of that is so much exploration into why we believe the things that we do, that I think for ordinary people to tap into that, I think it helps them to understand not only the world, but themselves better. And in terms of like what Hani was saying, like that inciting action and that change, like you really have to kind of like, use a little bit of intelligence in order to like delve deeper.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think of you know, the hero's journey, which you know we recently covered in the Héroes de Los Ángeles class, and how basically in the hero's journey, without some sort of inciting action, without some sort of conflict that changes or disrupts the hero's status quo, you know, you won't get their growth. You won't see them change over time. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of that you guys are all touching on in your analysis of the quote. Abraham, ¿qué dices, mano?
Well, I love Nietzsche, but I have to disagree on some points on this one, especially when he's talking about the ordinary people, right? Especially when he lives in a world where there's a lot of classicists going on. But I really love the part when he's talking about predicting how people is gonna react in advance, which is what writers have to do, right? We have to put our head inside somebody else's head, so think on how they're gonna react. That's a big part of writing.
Exactly. And that's what I was talking about before, you know, where I think that this quote really speaks to us as writers, you know, especially writers that are writing from the point of view or using a persona to tell the story of another character, right? You have to put yourself in the mind frame of that character and think, well, you know, what are they going to do in an extreme situation? I mean, aquí la cita dice que intentarán escaparse de una situación desagradable con el más pequeño gasto de inteligencia, right? To escape a disagreeable situation with the smallest possible expenditure of intelligence. That's what most people tend to do. And that's probably true for the average person. You know, a lot of us, I don't think, are going to ever resist some sort of disagreeable situation and really fight all the time. I might be wrong about that, though, you know. And there are obviously situations that are extreme situations where, you know, we will go out and march in the streets because we're so upset. So, you know, there's definitely different levels of escalation that we might go into. pero al fin, cuando hablamos así como autores, como poetas, we really do have to predict what the average human behavior might be like in, our everyday stories. Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas about what Nietzsche is saying in our quote this week? Yeah, Ani?
I was just noticing that we went off of what we thought that he's talking about, but he actually says the smallest possible expenditure of intelligence, not energy. He's not saying that it's easier. He's just saying that they're not going to spend a lot of time thinking it through.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if that changes anything or adds another layer or aspect to it. Like, is it talking about just being reactive and
mm-hmm.
based on emotions, or something else?
Mm-hmm.
Is he talking about smart action as opposed to right, not cowardly action, not quiet action, but unintelligent action? I don't know if that shines a different light on it. I don't know.
It's an excellent observation, Ani. I'm glad that you picked up on that.
Because you could blow up at somebody, right? And it's
yeah.
And you would be fighting. You'd be fighting a fight, but
mm-hmm.
is it the intelligent action
mm-hmm.
in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to think about this a little more.
Yeah, very good. Mauricio and then Gustavo.
Just to add to that, I just thought about a scene from or a chapter in 1984 when I guess the author is in the common cities, and he witnesses basically like the pros, which are basically just the common people, the working people,
mm-hmm.
and he notices that they are arguing over like a pot or something that was really insignificant in his mind, but what he noted about it is that they fought with such like power and such like animosity, and they were ferocious against each other. And he was kind of musing about like if they would direct that energy towards like as a collective, towards like the government, like towards a system that is overpricing these pots instead of like the vendor in front of them, then they would actually make intelligent change. And that would be, I guess what Ami was referring to, like the intelligent fight. Versus like sometimes we get very reactive and we just need to do something. So we just I guess going back to Nietzsche's quote, like we commit an action with the least amount of intelligence because we're not willing to direct that anger and think about where our anger would be most palpable and create the most lasting change. We just want to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm going with that, And then there's that distinction between intelligence and using your intelligence to kind of harness your emotions, like rein in those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. All of these are excellent points, and I'm really glad that you guys picked up on the idea of reaction. Gustavo?
Maybe, let's see. I was just thinking that maybe I'm doing it right now, and maybe I don't want to expend a lot of energy in thinking of this because I just thought, well, what if he's just, sorry to hate me, but what if he's just a little bit arrogant too? And he's saying that usually most people are not as creative as him since he's probably expended a lot of energy. That's the simple thing, but maybe that proves his point that I just want to, for right now, be not as creative as all you in the moment.
I think that it's not maybe about like creativity in the sense of are we really thinking on a deeper level? That's not maybe so much what's happening right now, but I do think that it is worth knowing that, Friedrich Nietzsche was a philosopher and a cultural critic, aside from being also a creative person, from being a composer, poet, and a philologist, um, which is a person that studies language specifically. That's what philology is the study of language and its origins. Um, and so obviously Nietzsche spent a lot of time really thinking about people, how culture is produced. And being a cultural producer and a critic of culture, he obviously had these ideas about, whether or not like people were smart ultimately, you know. Um, but I think more importantly is what you all picked up on, right? This is, I think, more a comment on reaction, right? How do people actually react to situations? And I would honestly say that the majority of us react and are reactive as opposed to being proactive and actively seeking to, I don't know, be better people at any given time. Um, we react, like, let's say, for example, I'm feeling like I need to be more creative. So what am I going to do? I'm going to react to that feeling and then go to a creative writing class, you know. Um, and that's me taking an action, taking an action in response to a situation. They kind of, like Mauricio is asking, right? Can they go hand in hand? I do think that they go hand in hand, right? It's sort of like a cycle of action and reaction. You can't have one without the other, and you can't necessarily have a reaction without some sort of external force that's forcing you to react. It might be an internal force too, though, kind of like how we had talked about a few weeks ago, I think in the Héroes de Los Angeles class, in talking about the hero's journey, right? A hero can be, the villain in the story could be an external force. It could be another person. It could also be the inner demon that the hero has. And it could be that inner demon that we, as the hero of our own journey, are trying to overcome, always. And so it's very complex. It's very layered. And what we're talking about right now is really the way in which we are going to begin to characterize either ourselves or another character that we might be writing about. Because they're always going to be reacting to some sort of force, internal or external force. So with all of that said, I think it's time that we actually read some poetry. Now, this week, the poet that we're going to be reading. Oh, and just as a little reminder, right, of what we've been discussing, characterization is what this is all about every single week. And so to just sort of remind ourselves, right, that characterization is the creation or construction of a fictional character. But what I like to emphasize every week is this: it's a description of the distinctive nature or features of someone or something. Now remember, it's the distinctive nature that we've been really focusing on, right? From the objects that we carry and put value on to, the way in which we have our relationships and the way we talk about our relationships. Those are things that make us distinctive in nature. And I would say that what Nietzsche was sort of trying to say in his quote, my argument would be that, the distinctive nature of people is to use the least amount of intelligence in a disagreeable situation, right? Like that's something that makes us all distinctively human, is that we try to go with the flow as much as possible, and we are reactive. So here, our poem from this week comes from Victor Hernandez Cruz, who was born on the 6th of February in 1949. He is still alive. He's a Puerto Rican poet, and he's a member of the Nuyorican Poets. If you're not familiar with the Nuyorican Poets, it's a group of poets of Puerto Rican descent who are in the New York area, and they were very much a very vibrant group of poets that were some of the first poets to actually bring in Puerto Rican culture into poetry and art, and we're very much about the performance side of it. So a lot of the New Yorican poets were also musicians, and Victor Hernandez is actually recognized as a very musical poet, and I believe he's also a musician too. He might play some instruments, but he was also, more importantly, he was named one of America's greatest poets by Life magazine in the year 1981, and was the very first Latino in the United States to have this honor bestowed on him. So he's a pretty important figure in poetry, especially for Latinos in the United States. And here we have song 1 from 3 songs from the 50s. Do I have a volunteer that would like to read the poems for us? Feel free to just call out if you'd like to be our reader.
I'll go.
Excellent. Go ahead, Mal.
Julito used to shine the sole off his shoes before he to the podium and take the wax off the floor while Tito Rodriguez flew around the walls like a parakeet, choking maracas. It was around this time that Julito threw away his cape because the Umbrella Man and the Dragons put the heat on all the Lucans who used to fly around in Dracula capes, swinging canes or carrying umbrellas. Even if there was no rain on the horizon, the same epocha my mother got the urge to paint the living room pink and buy a new mirror with flamingos elegantly on the right-hand corner, because the one we have is broken from the time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito and knock the party out of him.
Excellent. Thank you, Mal. Y para los que nos van a ver o están escuchando en español, do I have a volunteer? ¿Quién gusta leer canción número 1 de 3 canciones de los 50? Any takers?
I'll give it a try.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Luz.
Canción 1 de 3 canciones de los 50. Julito lustraba el alma de sus zapatos antes de irse al Palladium para quitar la cera del piso mientras Tito Rodríguez volaba por las paredes como periquito ahorcando maracas. Fue por ese tiempo que Julito tiró su capa, porque el hombre del paraguas y los dragones perdieron fuego a todos los
Pequeños.
que volaban. En capas de Drácula, columpiando bastones o cargando paraguas, aunque no hubiese lluvia en el horizonte. Esa misma época, mi madre tuvo el impulso de pintar la sala de color rosita y comprar un espejo nuevo con flamencos, elegantemente por la esquina. Derecha porque el que tuvimos se rompió aquella vez que Carlos intentó meterle respeto a Julito y sacarle la fiesta adentro de él.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Luz. Yes. For those of you that wrote in the chat, it seems familiar. Yeah, we've actually reviewed this one before. So we're revisiting an old poem here that honestly, I think very much fits the theme here. So for those of you, though, that weren't able to partake in it before, what do you all think? And even those of you that remember it, what do you guys think?
Well, when it comes to the reactions that you were talking about, this kid is having trouble, like in gangs, I guess.
Mhm.
And the dad, which I expect is the I don't remember the name of the guy.
Carlos.
He actually him, was trying to correct him, I guess.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the reaction that we're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, we definitely have a few relationships in this poem that are sort of being spoken to. Some old school tough love, as Mauricio is saying in the chat.
Well, does that mean that the mom, she does really deal with the problem and to, how do you say, give her a peace of mind? She takes her prime time by paying the house or something?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Miss Lois. She, what does the poem say specifically? The poem specifically says, that same epoca, my mother got the urge to paint the living room pink and buy a new mirror with flamingos elegantly on the right-hand corner, because the one we had was broken from the time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito and knock the party out of him. There's a lot of things that are being said in that very small section of that poem. Right? She buys a new mirror. She gets the urge to paint the house pink. And why is that? Because the mirror that they had was broken that one time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito. So we're told a lot about these characters.
It's very heavy, but he condensed it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on in that home.
Mm-hmm.
And then, who is the big brother? It seems like if he was trying to, it wasn't a father, it seemed like it was a big brother trying to make something decent out of him. Did he say he knocked the party out of him? So the foolishness, he must have knocked him upside the head or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. And, Mauricio in the chat is getting the impression that Carlos is a stepfather. Personally, when I read this poem, I thought the same thing. I thought Carlos was not the actual dad. He wasn't Julito's actual dad. He was probably a stepfather or, some other male figure that was not part of the original family, right? Because the mom character, it's my mother. And Julito apparently lives there with my mother. So we could probably assume that the speaker of the poem is maybe like either a cousin or more than likely a brother or a sister to Julito.
My oldest son, who is now 57, 6, and when he was like maybe 13 years old, and he said after he got older, he told me, because he was kind of like a street boy, and he said the reason he did things, it irritated me, and he enjoyed doing that. And he would screw those little knots up on his head into like little devil horns. And he would get in the mirror and do some crazy dances and chants. I don't know if he was chanting anything, but he was acting foolish. And so one of the young ministers from our church, I would call them over to talk to him. So that kind of reminded me of that little segment of what I had to experience. Because, I didn't throw up my hand and say, I can't take it anymore. I said, I'm going to get somebody to deal with you, because being a single parent, Dad's gone, doing his thing. So he was he wouldn't have been any help. So I called this young minister to talk to him. So my son, after, they got older, we would laugh and talk about things stuff like that. And he told me because it irritated me, he enjoyed doing stuff like that. So, yeah.
That's funny, and I think that definitely, I think, says something to the psychology of that relationship at that particular time, right? The way that you told the story right now, Miss Lois, you're talking about it in a way that makes it sound like fun. You're laughing about it now, but in that time, at that moment, when it was happening, your description of your son makes him sound like a very rebellious kid.
I need help.
Yeah, you know, and maybe taken out of context, we might assume that he might have just been, a simple troublemaker. But if there was maybe more detail given, we could start to dissect the psychology of your son, like we potentially could with Julito in this particular poem, right? So there's essentially 3 characters, maybe 4. We can make an argument in this poem, right? We have Julito, who's our main character. We have the speaker of the poem, which we can assume is a sibling to Julito. We have the mother, which would be Julito and the speaker of the poem's mother, because they're named as my mother. And we have this Carlos character, right? What do we know about all 4 of these characters through this poem? Would you like me to read the poem again?
Yes, please.
All right. So I'm going to project it again here for everyone. All right. So listen to the poem and see what we can pick up about each individual character. Julito used to shine the sole of his shoes before he left for the Palladium to take the wax off the floor while Tito Rodriguez flew around the walls like a parakeet choking maracas. It was around this time that Julito threw away his cape because the Umbrella Man and the Dragons put the heat on all the Ricans who used to fly around in Dracula capes, swinging canes, or carrying umbrellas, even if there was no rain on the horizon. That same epoca, my mother got the urge to paint the living room pink and buy a new mirror with flamingos elegantly on the right-hand corner because the one we had was broken from the time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito and knock the party out of him. So what do we get? Yeah, so Mauricio, yes, go ahead.
These are obviously people in conflict, and although they're together, they're all separate.
Mm-hmm.
They have different roles, different situations, from young to old. You have the mother, father, narrator, and you also have another person. And you said there's 4 characters, perhaps. Tito Rodriguez could be a 5th character. We don't know much about him, except out the floor and the wax and everything. But everybody has a different role and different purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And although they do live together, they're all conflicted and trying to find themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The mother with the flamingos with the paint, the pink in the mirror. Julito with the shoes, the sole of his shoes. Tito Rodriguez, the narrator, and Carlos. That's the stepfather. So, and also there's also infighting too between Julito and Carlos because youth versus elder, or elder versus youth.
Mm-hmm.
And Julio is attempting to sow his wild oats while being a gang member with his group, with the Dracula and the umbrellas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Julito, Carlos, I'm thinking that he and the mother are married. They may be living together. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also culture involved too, because of the fact, this is like, this could be taken from New York versus California,
mm-hmm.
based on how it's setting to me. I know there's a Palladium on Sunset Boulevard,
mm-hmm.
the Hollywood Palladium. I'm not sure the Palladium could be in the East Coast. I don't know. And the rocks on the floor means you have a job to do. And the sole of the shoes means what you want to wear it to be proud
mm-hmm.
and to look nice.
Mm-hmm.
And the music's involved, the cape, the music, the maracas, the umbrellas, those are symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Canes are symbols. The umbrellas are symbols. The Draculas are symbols. And it tells me that it's a tough life and tough life.
Yeah, excellent dissection there, Miss Michelle. You touched on a lot of the different things that this poem is really trying to speak on. And I like what Mauricio is saying in the chat. Yeah, they're all reacting to the times. They're all reacting in their own unique way. Right? Julito according to Mauricio, is embracing it. Carlos is trying to fight against it through Julito, and the mother is ignoring it. Right? And yeah, the Palladium was a live theater. There is a Palladium here in LA, and there's also the Palladium in New York.
Cool.
And so I think, based on the context of the poem, we can assume that the Palladium is a live theater, and it is a place where people go to dance, right? Because Julito goes there to take the wax off the floor. So that's I think a reference to dancing. And we can probably assume that because Tito Rodriguez is a famous Puerto Rican singer, he's performing, right? Thanks, Mao, for putting a video up there, one of Tito's songs. And so Julito's about that party life, basically, is I think what we're getting, right? And he likes to look good, shining the sole of his shoes, using the word soul, S-O-U-L, to speak on not just the shoe, but what the shoe represents. So trying to show off, I'm assuming. The Umbrella Man and the Dragons, I'm pretty sure we can assume that those are gangs, a reference to gangs, right? And the Ricans who wear capes is probably like the gang color that Julito is most likely representing. Or the gang uniform that Julito uses. What else can we say about the psychology of each character? The mom is ignoring, but not just ignoring, right?
She could be the healer, but she's trying to change the vibes in the room and the house. Mm-hmm. So usually that's what moms end up doing, trying to bring everybody together. Mm-hmm. And the father or paternal figure there is trying to do it with a harsher way, you know. So that's the different approaches of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, to me, the mom is not emotional.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Miss Lois. I would say that the mom is sort of deflecting even, right? She's actually not just ignoring, she's completely detaching from the problems. She got the impulse, right? Notice that it's the word impulse that's used, if I remember right. That same epoca, my mother got the urge, is what it says. The urge to paint the living room pink. So she did it on an urge.
It drove her to it.
Yeah, as Caro wrote in the chat, coping by shopping.
Yeah, well, I cook a lot. That soothes me.
Yeah.
I get in the kitchen and start cooking. I'll just bake and whatever. That helps me.
Yeah, everybody has their own way of coping, right? Hers happens to be coping by shopping. And not just coping by shopping, but by, shopping for things that are, I don't know, maybe more for her first, right? Because...
No, but we as women, I don't know if men do it, but just window shopping, just to get out and get away, give yourself a break, to, give you some prime time to get away from the chaotic things that are going on, and it brings you peace.
Yeah.
Honey, where you been? Oh, I've just been out shopping, Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Mauricio wrote, she's subverting her frustration into buying. She's deflecting her frustrations through buying, through consumerism, right?
And she's a good homemaker. Yeah, she's a homemaker. Cause, Yeah.
I think Mauricio, it implies that there's a repeated conflict. I think that's right. I think that there is an implied repetition of conflict here. Because it's not the first time that Carlos breaks the mirror, it sounds like, to me. Because what does it say about Carlos? It was the mirror, the one that they had was broken from the time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito and knock the party out of him. And so,
I have so many thoughts on this. I don't want to assume too much time, but we used to have foster children, and there was this one boy that I had, and when his family would promise to come over to visit him or to come and get him, they never showed up, and I had him close to a year. And this is what his life was like. And he would burnt the carpet, and he would just do things to retaliate. But it was in my home that he did this, And I think I mentioned it before, like we can't whoop or hit the children. And my heart went out to them, and I felt their pain, But maybe this is what was wrong with this young sibling. He had troubles. Maybe he's a foster boy or something, or a stepson or something. And maybe this other guy that socked him wasn't his big brother. Maybe it was a stepdaddy that socked him. I don't know, but it seemed like if he had some issues, some mental, not mental, emotional issues. Yeah.
I think that's very possible, I like what Ani wrote in our chat. She's not just shopping, she's trying to cover up the ugliness by painting over it and putting up a new accessory. Right. So it's like all a facade. That's her way of dealing with it. And yeah, Mauricio is probably right. She's given up on Julito, on providing the discipline in the house. And so it's come to Carlos, who's, probably not the best of discipline enforcers. Environmental psychology. Yeah, there's something to that. What do you mean by that, Abraham?
Well, it's all about the environment. If you change it, you change. For example, when I think Luz talked about it when somebody passed away in her house, she ended up changing or painting the house because that helps. That's also why we have malls and all those like big environments, because it works a different way. It depends on the environment.
Yeah, I could see that, definitely. There's also, I think, another character that we've been sort of neglecting. I don't think there's a whole lot for us to speak on in terms of Carlos, right? We could probably all agree that Carlos sounds like a very harsh person, because he broke a mirror trying to discipline Julito. So there's a lot to be said in just that one action. But what about the speaker of the poem? That's a good question that Mauricio is asking in the chat. Does the speaker admire Julito? What do we know about the speaker of the poem by their choice of words? Let me present the poem again. Yeah, the poem does start with Julito. And he mentions the mother and Carlos. So here you have the poem on the screen again, I hope. For those that might not be able to see the screen, I'll read it again. Julito used to shine the sole of his shoes before he left for the Palladium to take the wax off the floor while Tito Rodriguez flew around the walls like a parakeet choking maracas. It was around this time that Julito threw away his cape because the Umbrella Man and the dragons put the heat on all the Ricans who used to fly around in Dracula capes, swinging canes or carrying umbrellas, even if there was no rain on the horizon. That same epoca, my mother got the urge to paint the living room pink and buy a new mirror with flamingos elegantly on the right-hand corner, because the one we had was broken from the time that Carlos tried to put some respect into Julito and knock the party out of him. What's the impression that you get of the speaker?
I get the impression that it's obvious he's on the outside looking in. And there are people and characters in this poem that he's thinking about and giving his own perception individually per person as well as collectively per person. And I would think this person, that the narrator, is probably frustrated and sad because one day Julito is going to become 18 or 21. And then you're going to have two gentlemen who are of age where elder versus youth again. And I'm 18 years old now, I'm 21 years old now, so therefore I can do what I can do. But this is your mother's house. So therefore you got to give her the utmost respect. And she's stoic. She's been used to this over and over before. This is not her first rodeo, sadly. It makes you wonder if there's, no doubt, abuse. We don't know, but that doesn't doubt it. This is obviously a family dynamic. And, you can't put a suture on a Band-Aid, so putting pink flamingos and painting is not going to solve it. It's not the solution. Either you work collectively, or like I've been told, I've been told before, but there's a saying that goes, either you do blame or get out the pot. And if you don't do this in the bud now, it's going to get worse. Eventually, they're all going to be statistics. We know about the news. What happens when there's too much conflict. It can happen in 2020 as well as when this time period happened. And it's like a keg of dynamite is going to explode. TNT, boom. Then what? So therefore, how can this narrator save their souls? I mean, soul is S-O-U-L, but soul can be also spelled S-O-L-E. Everybody has a soul, individually as well as together. So therefore, this is pretty drastic and sad. It's also perhaps cultural too, because we don't know what goes on in people's behind the glass doors and houses when the doors close. And if this is in a place in New York with a brownstone, or we never know. This is super versus a landlord. I mean, this is so much to take in. This poem is deep, and although it's written, it was written at a time that the saying that goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex poem.
Absolutely.
And I actually kind of agree with what Caro is noting in our chat, that there is definitely a sense of admiration that I get, even if it's just a small amount, but there is a sense of admiration that I get from the speaker in talking about sort of the freeness, right? The liberty that Julito has in being able to go out and dance, right? There's sort of like a sense of pride that is exhibited in the way that the speaker talks about Julito and Julito's desire to look his best in going out to dance. It is possible, I think, that Julito may be a cousin or a stepbrother, somebody that is part of the family, but not like a very direct relative. And it is interesting when we look at it that there does tend to be some sort of emotional distance that the speaker exhibits towards the end. It is my mother that is mentioned, and not our mother. So there's like a connection to Julito, but not a real strong one. So I do find that kind of interesting. Ultimately, I think, this poem, and really thinking about our quote from earlier, the poem does in some ways show us that the way in which each one of these characters is responding to their environment is by using the least amount of thought, and they're just simply reacting by action, right? The action that Julito takes is to dress his best and go out dancing. The reaction and the action that the mother takes is by going shopping and just painting on an urge, right? And Carlos's reaction to all of this is to be violent, to actually break things. None of those things show us a lot of intelligence, a lot of reflection on their part. But it does tell us a lot about who these people are. And yeah, thanks Mauricio for that observation, right? The narrator's reaction is just simply being there, observing, being observant of all of this, and having maybe an opinion, maybe not. Miss Luz? I think you're on mute, Miss Luz. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
That's fine.
The narrator reminded me of when my older brother was getting into a lot of trouble, and I was just like checking it out, trying to figure out, okay, if he does that and he gets into that much trouble, how much can I push the envelope? So, and they're like, okay, what are the rules? What are the consequences? Mm-hmm. Someone that you're like, you're involved, but you're not involved. You're kind of outside of it because you're not in trouble. And, but you do admire the person that has the guts to go that far. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, you don't want to follow his footsteps because you're gonna get what he's getting. So yeah, it just brought back some flashbacks of growing up and watching my brother catch hell for being a rebel. So yeah, I think he's trying to learn, get a sense of what are the consequences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Ultimately, I think, the point of this poem, at least for our lesson, is to really notice how we can characterize, whether they be real or imagined characters, people, individuals, through their responses to their environment, to external stimuli, basically. All right? There is a lot that is being told in a fairly short poem. I mean, this poem is, I think, like about 25 lines long, maybe a little bit more. So it's a relatively short poem, and we learn a shit ton about each one of these individuals, from their emotional distance to how they are escapists, by being consumers. There's a lot that happens, and we're even told a lot about their individual relationships with each other in a very small space. So ultimately, what I'm hoping that y'all kind of get out of this is that when you're writing about your characters, or even about situations that you may have lived, as you're writing and characterizing the characters that are going to appear in your writing, you're probably going to do it from a point of view of their reactions to a disagreeable situation, kind of like what we were saying at the beginning, right? The inciting action and the response that your character takes, that's going to tell us a lot about who they are as an individual. So I have, I guess, one more poem that I'd like to share with you guys. It's actually one of my own poems, and I didn't really have it ready to show y'all, but let me see if I can find it real quick to share with you. A poem that is about a character responding to external stimulus. Let's see here. So this poem I wrote it many, many years ago. I think it was like back in 2005 or something like that. So it's a relatively old poem. And it's a poem that actually I included in my book, Love Notes. It's called Salsa Fresca. It goes, her shoulder blades dance together as she slices a tomato. I sit at the table tapping my spoon to my heartbeat. Click, 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 click. Her hips sway as salt, pepper, and cilantro meet diced tomatoes, onions, and peppers. Click, 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 click. The small of her back arches as she struggles to squeeze a lemon the way it does when I run my hand down her spine. Click, 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 click. Her shoulders become glazed with juice, glistening like those moments after our late nights in July. Click, 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 click. Suddenly, she stops, turns around and frowns. Stop.
Shame on you. You're trying to entice her to stop cooking to go to the private area of the house. And she says, no, stop. I got to cook. Leave me alone.
That wasn't exactly what I was thinking when I wrote it, but
Because first I thought it was a mom cooking, and you know how you cook, and you're dancing and you sashaying around because you're happy, enjoying in your cooking, and then that couple of bottom lines, the late night thing changed the whole persona.
Well, Ani is correct in that it was meant to be a playful poem. And keep in mind, right? This is written kind of like as a persona poem. So, if we had the time to really get into the poem, you would notice that it's written from the perspective of obviously the person looking at the woman, as she is preparing a salsa fresca, right? And he's getting turned on by her. And, the action that he's doing is the tapping of the spoon on the table. And it's getting progressively faster and faster to the point where she gets annoyed and tells him to stop. Right? He never says anything. The speaker of the poem never says anything. The speaker of the poem is just simply observing and slowly building up. And yeah, I'm sure that would have been annoying to anybody to hear the tapping of the spoon on the table, with no words, no context, just not knowing what's going through the mind of the speaker. So that right there was, kind of meant to be a poem that shows how, a character can be portrayed and how the, interaction with another character could sort of show us what is happening, in that particular moment. So my point is that your writing prompt for this week is to really think about what are the ways in which characters, you or a fictional character, might respond to a situation that may be disagreeable, right? Show us the character of that individual by, setting up a scene for us and the ways in which these characters respond or react to each other. So one more time to sort of simplify it. Through poetry or a little short story, set up a scene in which characters are responding or reacting to one another. And what does that say about them? Yeah, I agree, Mauricio. That definitely does, bring up Caro's poem about the grocery store. So yeah, that's another good example of this kind of poem that I'm asking you to write. So any questions or final comments?
Louis said, assuming we should be trying to, characterize the characters as much as we can with their actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's essentially what this prompt is about. Is about characterizing these individuals in your poem or short story. You're characterizing them by showing us their responses and their reactions to a situation that may be an uncomfortable situation, might be a situation that is something that's maybe a little on the extreme side, but it's really about their responses, right? How are they responding to each other? And that's going to tell us a whole world about who that person is. All right. So, any other questions or final comments? No? All right. Well, in that case, I guess we'll call it a night. It was good to see you all. I hope you have fun writing this poem. It doesn't have to be a very serious poem like like our sample from Victor Hernandez. But have fun characterizing your characters through poetry. Take care, everyone. I'll see y'all next week.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good night, everyone.